And now to our very first crossover conversation for this year, of course, with our partners. It's been 3.5 months after the German elections. Now the country still has no government. Today, the leaders of Angela Merkel's Conservatives and the Social Democrats are meeting to discuss the way forward for the country. Political correspondent with our partners, DW, joins us with some more. Christopher Springgates. Now, Christopher, it's good to have you, and I hope that you've had a very good year. Tell us about what...
I have, thank you. I hope you have too.
Right, I have. Tell us about what's going to happen exactly today and after the talks. What are Germans to expect?
Well, gov't, these are essentially talks about talks about talks. As you mentioned, the leaders of Angela Merkel's Conservatives and the Social Democrats are meeting today, and they're going to be talking about the exact schedule for exploratory talks with view to forming a coalition. Those exploratory talks start on Sunday. They run for 5 days. And then both sides decide whether they're going to launch full coalition talks. So talks about talks about talks. You know, Germany has this long tradition of being ruled by coalition governments. That always means fairly long, fairly complicated coalition talks. This time round, though, the process is breaking all the records. As you mentioned yourself, we're 3 months and counting after September's election, and we still have no new government here in Germany.
Wow. So ahead of this, and you've just described it as breaking the records, what's the mood ahead of Sunday's exploratory talks? Is Germany going to see a new government anytime soon?
The mood is quite tense, to tell you the truth, for two reasons. There are two factors. One is the Social Democrats, who are not keen at all to revive their coalition with Chancellor Angela Merkel. That's simply because every time they've been in coalition with Chancellor Merkel, they've lost support, they haven't benefited. So they've been making some pretty radical political demands even before any of these talks get going. So that's complicating, will complicate negotiations. And the other factor that's complicating negotiations is that hardliners within Chancellor Merkel's Conservatives, they too are formulating some political demands, including, for instance, much tougher policies in the area of immigration and political asylum. That's something that the Social Democrats won't want to swallow. So the mood is tense. I think in the end we will have a coalition between Chancellor Merkel's Conservatives and the Social Democrats. I don't think it's going to be soon, though. It may even be Easter before we have a new German government.
Well, that sounds pretty long, but well, the Germans would have to wait. In the meantime, though, of course, there's a working machinery. But why is it taking Germany so long to form this government?
I think the key development, long-term development, is that Germany's political landscape has become much more complicated. You know, it used to be dominated by two large parties, the Conservatives and the Social Democrats, but in September we had really what was an inconclusive election. None of the classic constellations managed to gain a parliamentary majority. In the past it's been, you know, the Conservatives ruling with the Liberals, for instance. They didn't win a majority at September's election. We've also had the Social Democrats ruling with the Greens, the environmentalist Greens. They also didn't win a parliamentary majority. So what policymakers tried over the last few months was to form a completely different constellation involving Chancellor Merkel's Conservatives, the Liberals, the FDP, and the Greens. That had never been tried out before. Talks were complicated, they were long, but they were making progress, and then suddenly the Liberals pulled out. We're still trying to fully understand why they pulled out, but essentially I think it has to do with the fact that the big parties in Germany are losing influence over the years. Smaller, sometimes more disruptive parties are gaining influence. We now, for instance, have, for the first time in post-war history, a far-right party in the German parliament. The Alternative for Germany, an anti-immigration party, very disruptive. So it's just much more difficult than in the past to form a coalition, and German politicians need time to adjust.
Right, sounds like a worldwide phenomenon, you know, the change in the political dynamics. But thank you so much, Christopher, for that update. Christopher Springate is political correspondent with our partners, DW, bringing us our very first crossover with our partners in Germany. You're still watching The Pulse with me, Gifty, and up here.